If Niccolo Machiavelli were walking the earth in 2026, he would not be wasting his time penning manuscripts for the masses. He would be orchestrating global dominance from the shadows, running empires without his name ever appearing on a deed. You would not find him engaging in petty debates on social media or chasing likes. He would be the invisible hand behind the algorithm, the ghost in the machine, pulling strings so delicate and precise that the victims would call their downfall destiny. We exist in an era that is addicted to exposure, where visibility is mistaken for value. In this noisy landscape, the modern Machiavelli would secure absolute power through the strategic application of invisibility. Today, I am going to dismantle the illusion and hand you the blueprint. We are not discussing inspirational quotes. We are analyzing doctrine. Here are 21 psychological laws for total command adapted to how the master strategist would operate if he were standing right beside us. Understand that the human animal judges reality by optical input rather than tangible proof. If you can manipulate the lens through which they view you, you dictate their physical actions. Rule number 1. Cultivate the art of being underestimated. Machiavelli knew that power is most secure when it is camouflaged as mediocrity. A weapon concealed is infinitely more dangerous than one brandished. In the current year, everyone is manic in their pursuit of validation. They rush to flash their credentials, scream about their achievements, and assert dominance to soothe their own egos. They are desperate to prove they are the sharpest intellect in the building. But the true prince would never make such a noisy entrance. He understands that looking dangerous makes you a target. He would enter the room last. He would observe the dynamics first. He would speak only when the silence becomes unbearable, and he would say the thing nobody else had the courage to articulate. By doing this, he commands the environment without triggering its defenses until it is far too late to stop him. Allow them to believe you're quiet. Encourage them to think you're harmless. Let them write you off as insignificant. When a rival believes you pose no threat, they lower their guard and reveal their soft underbelly. That is the precise moment you strike. From an angle they never bothered to fortify. Rule number 2. Charisma is a more lethal weapon than honesty. We live in a hyper-connected, image-obsessed simulation. In this world, the truth does not go viral, perception does. Machiavelli understood that the mob sees the mask you wear, not the soul underneath. Very few individuals will ever touch your true substance. Therefore, do not waste energy trying to prove your moral integrity. Invest your energy in constructing an impenetrable illusion of virtue. He would smile in the corporate boardroom while methodically planting the seeds of his rival's destruction. He would charm his enemies, feeding them false optimism, disarming them with a likability that makes betrayal seem impossible. This is the supreme art form. It is not about being a good person. It is about being universally perceived as a good person. You do not have an obligation to be transparent. You have an obligation to be persuasive. Do not attempt to correct the public's misconception of you. Leverage it. Let them place the crown of the hero upon your head while you quietly rewrite the script to ensure you win in the final act. Rule number 3. Weaponize ambiguity. The average person fights desperately to be understood. The Machiavellian operator does the exact opposite. He keeps the world off balance. One day he is cold and distant. The next he is overwhelmingly generous. Sometimes he is a ghost. Other times he is an intense force of nature. This is not because he is confused. It is because he wants them to be confused. Confusion triggers a psychological state of obsession. Obsession narrows focus, and focus is the currency of influence. When people cannot easily categorize you, they begin to study you. They analyze your syntax. They dissect your micro-expressions. They overinterpret your silence looking for meaning where there is none. They begin to orbit around your ambiguity, their minds trying to solve a riddle that you created to trap them. That is the essence of control. You cease to be a mere human being and transform into a puzzle. The human mind is hardwired to fixate on puzzles until they are solved. Machiavelli would tell you that the people you own are not the ones you pay, but the ones who cannot stop thinking about you. Cease the habit of over-explaining your motives. Stop clarifying your stance to make others feel comfortable. Stop rushing to fill every awkward pause with noise. Leave gaps in the narrative. Speak in ciphers. Simply smile. When they ask personal questions, you have no intention of answering. Confusion breeds curiosity, and curiosity creates a gravitational pull that few can resist. Rule number 4. Curate the exhibition, but lock the workshop. In a world where every breakfast and breakdown is broadcast, Machiavelli would move like a submarine deep and undetected. Everyone else is busy building a personal brand, posting status updates, sharing their journey, and showing their receipts to strangers. But the moment you reveal your trajectory, you allow the world to calculate your velocity. They prepare countermeasures. They form coalitions against you. They construct narratives to box you in. They lay mines on the road you just announced you were taking. So what is the strategic move? Keep your output highly visible, but keep your input strictly classified. He would appear transparent, open, and accessible, all while obscuring the true mechanics of his operation. A prince must be ready to act against loyalty, against charity, and against sentimentality to preserve his position. Translation: look like a saint. Move like a predator. Do not telegraph your strategies. Do not explain your systems to anyone. Do not tell a soul what you are building until the construction is finished and the fortress is secure. Let them believe you're lagging behind. Let them think you're sleeping. Then overtake them with a sudden acceleration they have no data to predict. Control the public feed. Guard the private factory. Rule number 5. Construct a perfect mask, then deliberately let it fracture. Machiavelli understood a nuance that modern manipulators often miss: perfection is boring and forgettable. Flaws are magnetic and addictive. So you build the persona. You become the picture of confidence, poise, high intelligence, and stoic calm. But then, on rare occasions, let the mask slip. Reveal a controlled imperfection, a flash of sharp aggression, a calculated moment of vulnerability, or a burst of terrifying insight that proves you are far more complex than they assumed. Why do this? Because people do not obsess over what they have already figured out. They obsess over things that feel just slightly out of their grasp. Give them 90% of the character, then go dark. They will chase that missing 10% for years, trying to understand who you really are. A wise ruler cultivates the appearance of virtue while keeping the dagger close. Be the beacon of light, but occasionally flash the darkness underneath. Let them catch a fleeting glimpse of the abyss, then slam the curtain shut. You will become instantly unforgettable. Not because they fell in love with the mask, but because they saw it slip. And now they are consumed by the need to know what lies behind it. Rule number 6. Always say less than necessary. When people talk too much, they are leaking power. They reveal their insecurities, their desperate need for external validation, and their fear of being misinterpreted. They show their emotional dependency on clarity. But the individual who speaks with absolute precision and stops speaking before the explanation is complete sucks the oxygen out of the room and dominates the hierarchy. Machiavelli never spoke with the intention of being understood. He spoke to establish a hierarchy and create a deliberate divide. He wielded words like surgical scalpels intended to cut, never as blankets meant to comfort. In the heat of a negotiation or the friction of a disagreement, he would offer a single sentence, perhaps two. Then he would simply stop, allowing the crushing weight of the silence to overpower the room. It is within that vacuum, that uncomfortable quiet, where true psychological terror takes root. Why does this work? because human beings are hardwired to project their own insecurities into the void. Their minds immediately begin to race, asking, "How much does he actually know? Why is his reaction so muted? What is his next move?" You haven't uttered a syllable, yet in their anxiety, they have authored an entire thriller in their minds, casting you as the mastermind they cannot possibly outwit. So what is the language of true power? It is brevity. You do not speak to satisfy their curiosity or to seek validation. You speak only to disrupt and command their train of thought. Then you pause. Force them to lean in closer. Force them to second-guess everything. Let them sit in their own discomfort. Because genuine mystery, the kind that builds empires, is forged in the empty spaces between what is said and what is withheld. Rule 7. Dissolve the boundary between threat and ally. In the hyper-connected landscape of 2026 people are desperate for clarity. They obsess over defining who stands with them, who is plotting against them, who is a safe harbor, and who is a predator. Machiavelli's genius lay in never allowing anyone that luxury of certainty. He would break bread with his sworn enemies, publicly laud his rivals with praise, and fiercely defend the very people he was privately maneuvering to eliminate. What was the logic? It is simple strategy. When people perceive you as a clear danger, they fortify their defenses. But when they perceive you as neutral or benign, they lower their guard and go to sleep. And history teaches us that the optimal moment to strike is when the target is slumbering. A lion cannot protect itself from hidden snares, just as a fox cannot fend off a pack of wolves. Therefore, one must possess the cunning of the fox to identify the traps and the ferocity of the lion to terrify the wolves. You must embody both archetypes simultaneously. This means you applaud your adversary's strategy moments before you dismantle it. You nod in agreement with your critic right before you quietly replace them. You maintain an air of total passivity until your absence transforms into a weapon. Be warm, be inviting, utterly disarming, right up until the second you execute your move. By the time they realize the game has changed, it is far too late for them to react. Here is the modern translation of this ancient wisdom. Speak briefly. Smile frequently. Maintain a mask of neutrality and remove obstacles while they are still trying to decipher if you're even a player in the game. Rule 8. Manufacture a sense of safety before seizing control. The path of least resistance to removing a rival is not through direct conflict. It is achieved by convincing them that you pose absolutely no danger to their position. Convince them you're an ally. Make them believe you're invested in their victory. Then, once they have handed you their trust, you make your move. Machiavelli would meticulously analyze your behavioral patterns, adopt your specific vocabulary, champion your concepts, and offer only the mildest, softest disagreements. He would never allow you to feel the sting of losing. Instead, he would craft the illusion that you were the one leading him, the one in charge. Once you felt completely secure in that delusion, he would act with surgical precision, decisive, fast, and clean, so that by the time you felt the betrayal, he was already sitting in your chair. The reality is that men are simplistic creatures so driven by immediate gratification and present needs that a skilled deceiver will never find a shortage of willing victims. Therefore, tell them the narrative they crave, show them the image they desire, and seize what they never guard at all while maintaining a pleasant demeanor. Rule 9. Engineer. Absolute dependence. Then simply withdraw. If Machiavelli wished to truly dominate an individual, he would never resort to overt threats or intimidation. Instead, he would assist them in a manner that slowly, quietly built a structural reliance. He would teach them a skill only he possessed, or resolve a crisis no one else dared to touch. He would provide a stability they had not earned, making himself the cornerstone of their success without ever demanding credit or applause. And then, without warning, he would vanish. No explosive anger, No dramatic revenge, just a cold, total withdrawal of support. Why is this effective? Because nothing devastates a human being faster than the abrupt removal of a crutch they have become addicted to. Men are kept honest only by necessity. Give them freedom, and they drift toward dishonesty. Thus, Machiavelli would position himself as your necessary illusion, the person you arrogantly thought you could do without until the moment they were gone. This is the blueprint for becoming unforgettable. You create a void. You force them to lean their entire weight on you, and then you pull your hand away mid-step. They will not hate you for it. They will hate their own weakness. They will loathe how desperately they need you, and they will spend years trying to fill that empty space. Rule 10. Weaponize the act of generosity. Most people perform favors because they want to be liked. A Machiavellian performs favors to generate leverage. If he granted you a benefit, he ensured you never forgot it. He wouldn't collect the debt with force. He collected it through his mere presence. You would feel the weight of the obligation. You would feel diminished small. You would sense a psychological imbalance in the relationship that you could not rectify. And that is precisely the goal. You offer them a shortcut, a brilliant solution, an unearned advantage. Then you pull back just a fraction. You ask for absolutely nothing in return. You simply let that imbalance fester and ache until they begin paying you back voluntarily with loyalty, unearned favors, critical information, or total submission. And should they ever suffer a lapse in memory, you remind them with a subtle glance. Remember that time, just enough to make them realize you hold the deed to their pride. Favors, when deployed with patience and strategy, harden into psychological chains. The longer they remain unacknowledged, the heavier they become around the victim's neck. Rule 11. Manufacture loyalty by facilitating their betrayal of others. People operate under the delusion that loyalty is the product of kindness. It is not. Machiavelli understood that the most effective method to secure someone's allegiance is to induce them to compromise their own morals for your benefit. You do not force this betrayal. You create the environment for it. You let them reveal a secret they should have kept. You let them violate a minor rule to help you. You allow them to speak ill of a colleague to gain your favor. You never ask for it. You never apply pressure. You simply leave the door slightly ajar and watch them walk through it. Now they are bound to you, not by admiration or love, but by the sticky web of complicity. Human beings instinctively protect the things they have compromised themselves for. So when someone betrays another to serve you, they are essentially investing their soul in your cause. The deeper they sink their resources into your cause, the harder it becomes for them to walk away. It is not affection that binds them, but the sheer cost of leaving. That is the essence of Machiavellian alliance building. It is not about charisma or charm. It is about strategic entanglement. This leads us to Rule 12. Dismantle alliances from within. Machiavelli did not simply outwit opponents one by one. He unraveled entire power structures. He understood that you do not attack a fortress head-on. Instead, you erode the foundation. He would never strike at the unity of a group directly, but rather by rot. He would infiltrate the circle, planting subtle suggestions and cultivating misalignment in their core values until the group fell apart on its own. There is an old maxim, he who empowers another ultimately drafts his own ruin. Therefore, you must locate the strongest link in their chain and inject it with a slow-acting poison. It starts with a whisper. A casual observation dropped at the perfect moment. Did you hear what was mentioned about you earlier? Have you noticed she stands silent when your name is dragged through the mud? You need not make an accusation. Simply say, just observe their behavior closely, and leave it at that. The seed is planted. You do not need to lift a finger to shatter their bond. You simply orchestrate the environment where they tear each other apart. Let their own paranoia and fear of treachery do the heavy lifting for you. Once the structural integrity of trust is compromised, the entire edifice comes down without you ever throwing a punch. This brings us to Rule 13, mirror their deepest insecurities. If you want someone to fall under your influence without resistance, you must make them feel understood, but only in a way that validates their internal doubts. You never use open insults or harsh criticism as those raise defenses. Instead, you utilize soft, surgically precise remarks that sting only after they have sunk in. It is impressive how brave you are, especially for someone who usually fades into the background. You always manage to survive even when the leadership does not take your contributions seriously. You're performing well even if your anxiety tries to sabotage you. You frame these as compliments, but they are psychological barbs. What is the function of these statements? They compel the target to agree with you based on their own hidden pain. Once you position yourself as the only one who truly sees their struggle, they attach themselves to you. They begin to revolve around your emotional center of gravity, deferring to your judgment because you validated their weakness. Machiavelli knew that direct threats create walls, but targeting insecurities opens the gates from the inside. Fear is powerful, but self-doubt is absolute. Once you are inside their psychological defenses, yours becomes the only counsel they heed. Enter Rule 14. Never be the one caught holding the dagger. In every act of betrayal, in every necessary purge, Machiavelli adhered to one supreme law. Always utilize a proxy to execute the unpleasant tasks. You are the conductor whispering the melody and setting the tempo, but you must never be seen on the stage under the harsh lights. If an associate needs to be discarded, frame the narrative, so it appears they were never loyal to the cause in the first place. When a rival must be eliminated, supply the provocation that causes them to destroy their own reputation, letting them pull the trigger on their own career. When chaos is required, feed contradictory intelligence to opposing factions, then vanish into the shadows before the spark becomes an inferno. The logic is simple. The executioner is feared and loathed, accumulating enemies with every swing of the axe. However, the one who steps in to restore order after the chaos is hailed as a savior. This is the Machiavellian masterpiece, the illusion of pristine hands. You pulled every string you moved, every piece, yet not a shred of evidence points to you. Even if they harbor suspicions, you are already seated on the throne they once occupied. Rule 15. Maintain absolute silence and allow them to unveil their hand. In any high-stakes room, the individual holding the true power is rarely the one dominating the conversation. It is the observer who says nothing yet sees everything. Silence is not emptiness. It is an aggressive weapon masquerading as passivity. If Machiavelli walked into our modern era of 2026, a world suffocated by podcasts, hot takes, and digital clutter, he would conquer by being the void. He would not rush to fill the quiet. He would let others suffocate on it. He would win by being the only signal in the noise. Here is the application. When someone insults you, offer zero reaction. When they demand your opinion, simply smile and allow them to continue rambling. When they attempt to provoke an emotional response, you blink, remain still, and give them nothing. That vacuum of sound becomes unbearable for them. It compels them to speak, to explain, to overshare. The more they talk, the more they expose their insecurities, their hidden agendas, and their soft underbellies. You have no need for interrogation tactics. They will voluntarily hand you the keys to their destruction just to escape the pressure of the silence you have weaponized. Never attempt to seize by force what can be secured through guile and silence is the most sophisticated form of deceit. Rule 16. Cultivate strategic unpredictability. Machiavelli would not advocate for being erratic or foolish, but he would insist on being unreliable during critical junctures. Why? Because consistency allows your enemies to build a model of your behavior. If they know exactly when you will respond, they control the rhythm of the engagement. If they know exactly how you crumble under stress, they will manufacture the crisis to break you. If they know you always take the moral high road, they will exploit your virtue. You must break the pattern. Sometimes you offer forgiveness. Other times you vanish without a trace. Sometimes you deliver a speech. Other times you let them drown in your indifference. Sometimes you engage with fury, and sometimes you watch them implode with a cold stare. If they cannot calculate your next move, they will fear you not because of your aggression, but because you are a cipher they cannot solve. Machiavelli famously noted that humanity is driven by two primary forces, love and fear. However, true dread is born from the unknown. The adversary they cannot predict is the one against whom they cannot defend. This leads to Rule 17. Assert your dominance through your absence. To achieve total psychological supremacy, you do not need to be physically present in the room. You must ensure your weight is felt even when your chair is empty. You accomplish this by becoming the gold standard, the haunting shadow over every decision they make. They begin to second-guess their strategies because they are terrified of how you might critique them. They cannot even enjoy their victories because they are paralyzed by the thought, "What would he have done differently?" Their inability to fully trust anyone else stems from a lingering, haunting realization they remember just how uncannily accurate your judgment was, and it terrifies them. This is the essence of psychological branding. It is never about the content of your speech. It is entirely about the weight of your energy. You imprint your presence by the way you carry yourself while you're still in the room, calculated, hyper-observant, restrained, and absolutely surgical in your movements. The goal is to ensure that long after you have exited the building, your ghost remains seated at the table. They cannot help but subconsciously measure every new person against the impossible standard you set. A true Machiavellian strategist would never need to go through the messy process of firing people or forcing compliance. He would construct a memory so potent and commanding that even in his absence, his subordinates would continue to operate strictly by his code, afraid to deviate. Rule 18. Never utter a threat. Allow the silence of fear to do the heavy lifting. Overt threats only breed defensiveness and resistance, signaling that you are losing control. Machiavelli had no need to scream, "I will destroy you." Instead, he cultivated an atmosphere where others were left agonizing over whether he might. That state of perpetual wondering, that immense psychological pressure, causes far more internal damage than any verbal assault ever could. Here is how you apply this in 2026. You do not verbalize, "I have the power to expose your secrets." You simply pause for 3 uncomfortable seconds when you catch them. In a lie, stare into their eyes and watch them unravel. You never say, "I am going to ruin your career prospects." You simply make one decisive phone call in their presence, hang up, and refuse to elaborate on who was on the other end of the line. You do not shout, "You are finished here." You simply vanish from their radar, completely withdrawing your attention and letting them spiral into a panic, obsessing over your next move. Why is this effective? Because the fear constructed by the human imagination is infinitely more terrifying than fear based on factual information. When they know what you are doing, they can plan a defense. When they do not, they are defenseless against their own minds. Once they are paralyzed by the dread of what you might be capable of, they will start working overtime to secure your approval, solely to avoid discovering the consequences of your displeasure. Rule 19. Delay your retribution until it creates a devastating impact. Machiavelli did not subscribe to the amateur idea of quick, hot-blooded retaliation. He believed in the discipline of watching, waiting, and allowing the offense to fester until the timing for the strike was mathematically perfect. Injuries must be inflicted all at once, overwhelming the senses, so that the bitterness is tasted for a shorter duration while the shock is absolute. Conversely, benefits and rewards should be distilled drop by drop. Keeping people dependent. This meant that when an enemy crossed him, he did not flinch. He studied their behavior patterns. He allowed them to get comfortable. He let them delude themselves into believing they had gotten away with their treachery. And then, on a Tuesday, when they least expected it, he struck clean, calculated, and total. You must understand that revenge is not merely about punishment or getting even. It is fundamentally about re-establishing dominance and control. When you react instantly to a provocation, you're allowing the adversary to dictate the tempo of the engagement. But when you delay, you force them to live in a state of paranoid suspension. They become incapable of enjoying their minor victories. They lose the ability to sleep soundly. They begin to dread every quiet moment, wondering if this is the calm before the storm. That chronic anxiety inflicts more damage on their psyche than any sudden outburst ever could. Rule 20. Transform yourself into a system rather than a mere man. Machiavelli never sought to be liked. He sought to be the structural foundation of power. He did not rely on superficial charm, but rather on the reality that removing him would cause the entire structure to collapse. That is the ultimate modern power move. Stop trying to build a name and start building a network, a philosophy, a standard of operation, and a strategy that is deeply embedded in how those around you function. Train people to think. Using your logic. Position yourself as the linchpin in systems that nobody else fully comprehends. Embed your voice and your rationale into the decision-making processes so that they echo in the boardroom long after you are gone. The objective is that even if they despise you or want to oust you, they physically cannot function without you. This is how enduring legacies are forged. You're not just feared while you're physically present. You're immortalized in the protocols and systems they cannot delete without destroying themselves. That goes beyond mere influence. That is permanent systemic psychological control. Rule 21. Condition them to be afraid of even speaking your name. The highest form of power is not recognition. It is myth status. It is the art of haunting. Machiavelli would be the figure people only reference indirectly using euphemisms. You know who I am talking about. Let's not end up like him. You remember how that situation played out last time. They refuse to say the name because speaking it feels like summoning a force larger than they can handle. You do not want to trend on social media. You want to linger in the collective unconscious. You do not aim to win petty arguments. You aim to fundamentally alter the atmospheric pressure of the room. You become the subject they are terrified to bring up because everyone else in the circle already understands the heavy consequences attached to your reputation. If Machiavelli were alive in the digital age of 2026, he would not be shouting for attention online. He would not be desperate for followers or likes. He would be woven into the fabric of power structures, shaping the global narratives from behind a veil of smiles and absolute silence. He would be that cautionary voice in your head, whispering, "Do not respond. Do not reveal your hand. Let them speak first and dig their own graves. And most critically, do not chase respect like a beggar. Position yourself so strategically that they cannot breathe without giving it to you. That is how you truly win. Not with fleeting fame, not with loud noise, but with a legacy so heavy they cannot stop it even if they try."